The stage lights of America's Got Talent 2025 shimmered like a galaxy of gold and blue, casting long reflections across the polished floor. The arena was packed, every seat filled, every eye fixed on the empty stage where something big, something unexpected, was about to happen. Rumors had been swirling on social media for days, whispers that felt too wild to be true. And then, a tiny figure stepped into the light. It was Elon Musk, known to the world simply as 10th. The audience gasped in unison. Not because he was famous, not because he was the child of one of the most influential men on earth, but because he looked so heartbreakingly small. The cameras zoomed in on him, revealing a child whose shoes were slightly too big, whose hands trembled just enough to catch the light, and whose eyes, wide, fragile, searching, carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. Simon Cowell leaned forward, elbows on the judge's table. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't smirking. He was studying the boy as if trying to understand what he was doing there. Beside him, Heidi raised her eyebrows in surprise. Sophia whispered, "Is that really?" Howie nodded slowly, stunned. Meanwhile, in the very important person balcony, the Trump family exchanged glances. They had been invited as special guests for a charity segment of the show. None of them expected this. But X didn't look at the judges. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at the VIPs or the lights or the cameras. He looked at the ground, at his shoes, then up toward the ceiling, as if past it, as if his gaze carried him somewhere else entirely. When Terry Crews walked up with the microphone, his voice softened. He seemed to sense it too, the tremor in the air, the quiet electricity, the feeling that this wasn't just another audition. "What's your name, young man?" Terry asked. X swallowed hard. The microphone trembled in his hands. "My name is X," he said, barely above a whisper. Some people in the crowd chuckled softly, thinking he was being shy or mysterious, but others, parents, grandparents, people who understood the silence in a child's voice, felt something tug inside them. Terry smiled gently. "And how old are you, X?" "4," he replied. And the arena gasped again. He was so little. Too little, some thought. Too young, others whispered. But Simon didn't look doubtful. He looked curious, intently curious. "Terry," continued X, "what brings you here to act?" The question hung in the air like a heartbeat waiting to drop. The boy looked down. He squeezed the microphone. For a moment it seemed like he wouldn't be able to say anything at all. Then, softly, he breathed out words that traveled further than the lights could reach. "I am singing for Mama, and for Jesus." You could hear the heartbeat of the entire theater stop. Even the cameraman froze. Even the background chatter in the wings disappeared. Simon Cowell blinked slowly, taken aback. "For Mama?" he asked, unable to stop himself. X nodded, his small voice steadying just a little. "She told me, when the world gets loud, I should sing. She said Jesus hears the truth in your voice even when people don't." His words stabbed through the room like a gentle, invisible arrow, soft, pure, and full of something the modern world often forgets to honor: innocence. A murmur rippled across the audience, not excitement, not shock, something deeper. Something emotional. Terry knelt beside him so they were eye level. "Do you miss your Mama, X?" he asked gently. The boy's eyes glistened, not with heavy, dramatic tears, but with that thin veil of emotion children try hard to hide. He nodded. "Every day." A woman somewhere in the audience covered her mouth, already crying. Elon Musk had chosen not to sit on camera, staying behind the curtains where the media couldn't reach him, but those with sharp eyes could see his silhouette, tall, still, hands folded tightly, as he watched his son take his biggest step yet. Simon cleared his throat, visibly moved. "Well," he said softly, "we can't wait to hear you sing, 10th." But X didn't move. He didn't smile. He didn't show confidence or flair, or any of the usual egged kid energy. He stood exactly where he was, looking up toward the blinding top lights, his expression somewhere between fear and longing. As technicians adjusted the mic height and checked the audio levels, X closed his eyes, and as the entire world watched him standing there, this tiny, trembling child with the most powerful name on the planet, one truth became painfully clear: this wasn't the son of a billionaire performing. This was a little boy trying to send a message to someone he hoped was listening. When the soft music cue began to flow through the speakers, X finally exhaled, a fragile, shaky breath that carried the weight of his young soul. He whispered under his breath, though the mic caught just enough, "Please help me, Mama, please help me be brave." A collective shiver ran through the room. The Trump family leaned forward, their earlier whispers fading into stunned silence. People at home, watching through their TV screens, felt an unexpected lump rise in their throats. This wasn't a performance, it was a prayer. A child's prayer wrapped inside a song he had not yet sung. And as the lights brightened around him, and the first note of the instrumental swelled, X took one tiny, trembling step forward, a step that would change his life. A step that would change the atmosphere of the entire arena, a step that made Simon Cowell press his hands together, almost as if bracing for impact. X opened his eyes, he looked again toward the sky. And then, with a small, hopeful breath, he prepared to sing. Backstage, before stepping onto the vast act stage, X had stood quietly in a corner, hands folded, listening to the muffled thunder of the crowd outside. The world imagined that being the son of Elon Musk meant living among rockets and robots, toys made of titanium, and dreams powered by electric engines. But X knew a different truth, one quieter, softer, often lonelier. His earliest memories weren't of spaceships or inventions, they were of his mother singing to him while running her fingers gently through his hair. She was the one who taught him lullabies. She was the one who told him stories of angels. She was the one who whispered prayers over him when the world felt too big, too bright, too frightening. And she was the one whose absence now echoed louder than any fame he had. While the technicians set up his microphone and tuned the audio levels, closed his eyes, letting his mind drift back into the warm glow of memory, he remembered one night, not long ago, when he had woken up from a nightmare, trembling. Thunder shook the windows as rain poured heavily outside. He had patted down the hole, clutching his blanket, whispering, "Mama, Mama?" She had been sitting by the window, watching the storm, her face lit only by the flash of lightning. When she saw him, she opened her arms. "Come here, baby." He ran into her embrace, burying his face into her chest, breathing in the familiar scent of vanilla and old books. She wrapped him tightly, rubbing his back, whispering soothing words that felt like soft feathers brushing across his fears. "What scares you, X?" she had asked him gently. He had looked up at her, eyes big, voice trembling. "I'm scared that someday, you won't be here to protect me." She cupped his cheeks with both hands. "Oh, sweetheart, mamas don't leave. Not really. Not ever. But what if you do?" he whispered. She kissed his forehead. "Then Jesus takes over, and he loves you even more than I do." X frowned, confused. "More than you?" She laughed softly. "More than me." He didn't understand then, not fully, but now, standing alone backstage at AGT, those words came back to him with the force of a gentle hurricane. They were all he had left of her wisdom, her strength, her love. Growing up a Musk was nothing like the world imagined. People saw the headline, Elon Musk's son. But X lived the reality, security guards everywhere. Strangers trying to take pictures of him, people assuming he had everything, so he must feel nothing. He often wished he could be just another child playing at the park, without journalists hiding behind bushes. A kid who could go to school, without everyone treating him like a walking headline. A boy who could have friends without wondering if they liked him, or his father's fame. His father tried. Elon spent nights reading to him, building little robots with him, taking him to SpaceX to show him the magic of creation. But even he couldn't shield X from the world's loudness. One night, when X had asked, "Daddy, why don't people know me for me?" Elon had paused, looking more like a man than the myth the world worshipped. "Because you come from a big name," Elon replied honestly, kneeling to meet his son's eyes. "But one day, you'll earn your own name, your own light." X blinked. "But what if people never listen?" Elon smiled softly. "Oh, they will. All you need is courage." X had tried to be brave. He tried to stand tall when cameras flashed. He tried to smile during public events. He tried to speak loudly when strangers asked him questions. But his heart remained quiet. His voice stayed soft. His world kept feeling heavy. The only place where he felt truly free was in music, especially the songs his mother had taught him. She always said, "When you sing, the truth in your heart becomes louder than the noise outside." He believed her. When he told his father he wanted to audition for ACT, Elon's first reaction was surprise. "X, are you sure?" The boy nodded. "I want to sing for Mama." Elon's eyes had softened, something the world rarely saw. He placed a hand over his son's heart. "Then, sing with this, not with fame, not with fear, with this." And so, X practiced. Late at night, early in the morning, in the quiet spaces where no one could judge him. And each time he sang, he imagined his mother sitting next to him, humming along, smiling proudly, telling him he was brave. But the truth was, He wasn't brave, not really. Even on audition day as he stood backstage, he felt like the noisy world was closing in on him again, camera flashing, producers whispering, people glancing at him as if waiting for something spectacular or strange. He felt the weight of every eye, every expectation. And yet, even in his fear, there was a light inside him. A small flame, a warmth that felt like Mama's hands still resting over his heart. He touched his chest, where he imagined her prayers lived. He whispered her words to himself, "When the world gets loud, sing your truth." He repeated it like a silent mantra, "Sing your truth. Sing your truth, sing your truth." And with each repetition, the fear loosened just a little. Then Terry Crews called his name. The crew signaled him forward. The stage door slid open, flooding him with blinding white light. And there he was, a tiny silhouette, about to step into a world far louder than any he'd ever known. But he remembered Mama. He remembered Jesus. He remembered the way singing made his heart feel big instead of small. So he took a breath. A small, shaking breath, but a brave one. And he stepped into the light. He wasn't doing this to prove himself. Not to the crowd. Not to his father. Not to the Trump family. Not even to Simon Cowell. He was doing it for the two voices that had always loved him most. Mama's gentle prayers and Jesus' quiet strength. Tonight, for the first time, he would let the world hear them too. The music began softly, so soft it was almost a whisper, like the beginning of a prayer drifting through the air. The arena, moments ago buzzing with murmurs and disbelief, quieted into a deep, reverent stillness. All eyes were locked on the tiny boy standing center stage. Musk, 4 years old, small hands gripping a microphone bigger than his courage. A child standing before millions. The lights dimmed except for one gentle golden spotlight that wrapped around him like a warm hug. It made him look even smaller, but somehow braver, like a candle flame refusing to go out in a storm. X's chest rose and fell. He blinked once, twice. Then he opened his mouth, and the world changed. The first note floated out soft, pure, impossibly angelic, not shaky, not timid, not childish. It was a sound that felt older than him, wiser than him. A voice polished by something deeper than training, polished by heartache, hope, and faith. The audience sat up straighter, as if a wave had passed through them. Even the camera zoomed closer, unsure if they were hearing correctly. Sophia pressed her hand over her chest. Heidi leaned forward, whispering, "Oh my God." Howie's jaw dropped. But Simon Cowell, the man known for being impossible to impress, froze completely. His eyebrows lowered, his lips parted, and for a rare moment, he looked stunned. Not entertained, not impressed. Stunned. X sang about love, the kind that doesn't fade with time or distance. He sang about a mother's prayers. About how her voice stayed with him, even in the loneliest moments. He sang about Jesus. Not in a preachy way, but like a child explaining the only comfort he's ever known. His tiny voice carried truths that adults often forget. You are never alone. Love doesn't leave. The light finds you even when everything feels dark. People in the audience began to cry quietly, wiping their eyes as if embarrassed to be moved by someone so small. But X wasn't performing. He wasn't showing off. He was releasing something that had lived inside him for too long, a song that had grown heavy in his chest, waiting for the moment it could finally breathe. As he sang the first chorus, the instrumental swelled behind him. Strings, piano, soft drums. But even with the music rising, his voice still shone above it, like a beacon. Like a child calling out from one world to another. Up in the very important person section, the Trump family, who had attended expecting a night of entertainment, stared in stunned silence. Melania pressed her hand to her heart. Barron's eyes softened. Donald Trump Sr., usually unshakable, nodded slowly, visibly moved. Something about X's innocence, his sincerity, penetrated even the thickest walls. And still he kept singing. His voice grew stronger, fuller, braver. On the second verse, he sang about walking through shadows, about nights when he cried quietly so nobody could hear. But each time he felt fear, he imagined Jesus holding his hand. Each time he missed his mother, he imagined her brushing his hair out of his eyes, whispering, "Sing, baby, God hears you." The cameras caught Elon Musk backstage. He was no longer standing. He was leaning against the wall, one arm over his face, the other pressed to his chest. No amount of genius, no rocket launch, no multi-billion-dollar empire could prepare a father for hearing his child sing like this, sing with such raw, unfiltered emotion. You could see him breathe shakily, trying to stay composed. This wasn't Elon Musk, the billionaire. This was a dad, hearing his son's heart cry and shine at the same time. Back on stage, X stepped forward just a tiny step, but to him, it felt like leaping over a mountain. And then he reached the part of the song written especially for this moment. Mama, this is for you. I'm singing to the sky, because I know you can hear me. I'm singing to Jesus because he carried me here. I'm singing so the world knows love never dies. His voice cracked on Mama, not because he messed up, but because his heart broke open right there. On national television, in front of millions, the note trembled, wavered, then lifted into a powerful, soaring sound that filled the arena like a miracle unfolding in real time. People gasped. Some stood, some clasped their hands as if praying with him. Even Simon's eyes glistened, not with tears, not quite, but with something close, something human. The camera panned to the audience. A woman with a Jesus Save necklace wept openly. A father in cowboy boots lifted his daughter onto his lap to help her see. A teenager who had been scrolling her phone stopped. Eyes glued to the stage, breath caught in her throat. This wasn't a performance anymore. This was a message. A reminder. A moment of healing disguised as a song. When X reached the bridge, the music softened again, giving his voice the space it deserved. He closed his eyes, completely lost, in the melody, in the memory of his mother's arms, in the warmth of his faith. Then, he released the high note. The note that would replay in millions of hearts long after the episode aired. It soared, it glowed. It lifted the entire room. Simon released a small breath he didn't realize he had been holding. The crowd rose, rows and rows of people standing, stunned, overwhelmed, swept up in the tidal wave of a child's truth. The Trump family stood as well. Elon Musk stepped forward from backstage, drawn toward the stage as if by gravity itself. Camera operators held their breath. Judges stared, speechless. And still, X sang. He finished with a whisper, a soft, trembling line that felt like a prayer. Being set free, love never leaves you, it just sings through you. As the final note hung in the air, silence. Pure silence. The kind that only happens after something holy, something miraculous. Then, the arena exploded. Cheers. Sobs. Clapping so loud it shook the floor. People chanting his name. Even the judges couldn't hide their shock. Simon covered his mouth with one hand, shaking his head slowly as if trying to process the impossible. How he kept saying, "Unbelievable, unbelievable." Heidi whispered, "That voice, where did it come from?" Sophia wiped her tears, then applauded with both hands in the air. And X? He stood still, breathing softly, looking up again, not at the crowd, not at the judges, but toward the lights. Toward heaven, as if hoping Mama heard every note. And in that moment, everyone, every judge, every viewer, every soul in the arena felt the same thing. This child's voice didn't just entertain. It healed, it awakened something. It reminded the world of love. The applause roared through the theater like a storm breaking open the sky. But X stood still, small, steady, breathing softly into the spotlight. His cheeks were flushed, his chest rising in fast breaths, but his eyes remained fixed upward, as if waiting for a sign, from someone only he could see. Simon Cowell was the first to speak, but for a long moment he couldn't. He tried, opened his mouth, closed it, pressed a hand to his lips, then looked away briefly, overwhelmed. For decades, he had critiqued the world's best voices, the world's boldest performers, the world's most dramatic stories, but never had he been confronted by a voice so pure it bypassed judgment altogether. When he finally looked back at X, Simon's eyes were softer than anyone in the audience had ever seen. "X," he began, voice low, cracking just slightly. I don't know what to say." And for Simon Cowell that silence said everything. Beside him, Sofia Vergara dabbed her tears with the back of her hand. "That was something heavenly," she whispered. "You're so tiny, but your voice, your heart, it's bigger than all of this." She swept her arm toward the massive stage, the lights, the cameras. Heidi leaned forward, both hands clasped near her lips. "It didn't feel like a performance," she breathed. "It felt like," she struggled for the right word, "a blessing." Howie Mandel, usually the Joker, stared in stunned awe. "I've watched this show a long time," he said, "but what you did, that wasn't talent. That was a miracle." The audience erupted again, cheering so loudly the walls trembled. But X didn't smile, he didn't bow, he didn't wave. Instead he whispered, barely audible into the microphone, "Thank you, Mama." The arena fell silent at once. Simon's hand curled into a fist, fighting emotion. Heidi's eyes filled again. Even Terry Crews, standing off to the side, placed a hand over his heart. Then, from backstage, a movement stirred. Elon Musk stepped forward. He wasn't presented with the typical celebrity entrance. No flashing lights, no dramatic music, no cameras rushing immediately to his presence. He walked slowly, almost cautiously, like a man afraid of breaking something delicate. He approached the side of the stage, stopping just before the final step up. Stage crew instinctively stepped aside, sensing the importance of the moment. For the first time all night, X turned away from the lights. He saw his father. Their eyes met, and everything inside the little boy softened. His shoulders relaxed, his breath steadied, his expression crumpled with relief. He ran, tiny footsteps pattering across the floor, and leapt into Elon's arms. Elon caught him instantly, holding him tight, so tight it looked like he was afraid his son might slip away if he let go for even 1 second. The crowd melted into emotional applause again. Even those who had come to see the billionaire, the legend, the tech icon were struck by the sight of a father holding his son, like he was the only part of the world that mattered. When Elon finally pulled back, his eyes were red, not streaming tears, but shining with the emotion of a man who had witnessed something sacred. He cupped X's cheek. "You did it," he whispered, though the cameras picked it up anyway. "Mama would be so proud." The judges heard it. The audience heard it. Millions watching from home heard it too. And somewhere in that moment, the world collectively held its breath. Then Terry Crews returned to the stage, voice trembling with excitement. "Judges," he said, "the world is watching. What happens now?" Simon brushed his hands through his hair, trying to compose himself. "What happens now," he said slowly, "is that we acknowledge greatness. True greatness, not the kind that comes from fame or money but from courage." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "X, you didn't just sing. You brought something into this room. Something we didn't know we were missing until we heard your voice." The audience nodded, murmured, wiped away fresh tears. Simon took a deep breath. "In all my years on this show, I have never seen a 4-year-old do what you just did." X blinked shyly, still half hidden behind his father's arm. "So," Simon continued, his voice suddenly firm, "I'm not going to waste a second." He stood, reached out, and slammed his hand onto the golden buzzer. The arena exploded, literally shaking from the impact. Gold confetti burst from cannons above, raining down on the stage like sunlight bursting into petals. The music swelled triumphantly. The crowd jumped to their feet, yelling, screaming, cheering. Heidi clapped wildly. Sophia covered her mouth again, overwhelmed. Howie stood, arms raised like a preacher witnessing a revival. Even the Trump family clapped, visibly moved, their faces reflecting surprise and awe. X looked up in wonder, tiny hands reaching for the golden sparkles drifting down. He laughed finally, a smile breaking across his face, bright and innocent and breathtaking. Elon laughed too, pulling his son close so they could experience the moment together. The cameras zoomed in on the two of them, father and son, bathed in gold, wrapped in love, surrounded by an audience united by one small boy's courage. Simon exhaled, spoke softly into his microphone. "You just gave America something it desperately needed." When the confetti began to settle, X looked upward again, not at the lights, not at Simon, not at the audience, but toward a place only he could see. And softly, so softly the microphone barely caught it, he whispered, "I love you, Mama. I hope you're smiling." The audience broke again, tears, applause, hands over hearts, faces full of emotion they couldn't contain. And in that moment, far beyond fame, far beyond headlines, far beyond anything his last name could ever mean, X Musk became something entirely his own. He became a symbol of love, of innocence, of faith, of the power a single child can have on millions of hearts. He had walked onto the AGT stage carrying grief, but he walked off carrying a nation. The lights of the AGT stage softened into a warm, golden glow, as if the entire world were exhaling at once. X remained standing in the center, his tiny chest rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. His hands were still clasped together, the final echo of his prayer song lingering. In the massive arena like the faint glow of stars after sunrise, all around him people were frozen, hands pressed to their lips, eyes wide, hearts wide open. It was the kind of silence that wasn't empty but full of emotion, full of realization, full of something bigger than anyone in that room. And then, as if America itself inhaled again, the audience stood slowly at first, then in a wave rising to their feet with an eruption of applause that felt like a waterfall breaking through a dam. X didn't flinch. He didn't lift his arms in victory. He didn't smile like a performer waiting for praise. Instead he bowed his head. Quiet, humble, almost prayerful again. It wasn't the reaction of a child chasing fame. It was the reaction of a child who understood the weight of hearts, not the weight of spotlights. Simon Cowell wiped the last of his tears, still visibly shaken. He leaned forward as if the distance between him and X was suddenly too much to bear. "I have seen thousands of acts," he whispered, voice trembling. "But what you just did, what you just gave us, that wasn't a performance. That was healing." The audience erupted again. But X still didn't move. He simply lifted his eyes, a soft, steady, peaceful look. "I just wanted my mama to feel loved," he said quietly, speaking for the first time since the song ended, "and Jesus told me to share that love with everybody." It was a sentence simple enough for a child to say, but heavy enough to break open hearts. Elon Musk covered his face, shaking as if holding back sobs he had denied himself for years. Beside him, X's mother, pale, fragile, but beaming, rested a trembling hand on his arm. The camera panned across the auditorium, catching faces for all walks of life. A construction worker wiping his eyes with his sleeve, a nurse pressing her hand to her heart, a teenager who normally hid behind headphones crying openly, the Trump family in the front row, stunned not by X's name, not by his lineage, but by the purity of his message. Former President Trump leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at X with disbelief. "Softened into something rare and genuine, that boy," he murmured to his daughter. "He has something nobody can buy, not even with all the money in the world." Ivanka nodded slowly, visibly emotional. "A heart like that," she whispered, "could change everything." Back on stage, Simon stood up. He didn't wait for dramatic music. He didn't wait for the cameras to set up the perfect angle. He simply rose, walked toward the golden buzzer, and placed his hand over it. The entire arena froze. X blinked, confused, almost innocent. Simon said, voice cracking again, "You reminded us what this show is supposed to be about. Not talent, not fame, but humanity, heart, hope, and love." He pressed the golden buzzer. The explosion of golden confetti was immediate, glittering pieces bursting upward like a fountain of stardust, swirling around X, dancing in the air as if heaven itself were celebrating. Some kids might have screamed, others might have jumped, or cried, or run into the judge's arms. X simply lifted his face, closed his eyes, and let the confetti fall like blessings. Not a boy in shock, not a contestant in disbelief. A child praying. All at once, Elon Musk stood, rushing toward the stage without hesitation. Security began moving, unsure of protocol, but Simon held up a hand, signaling to let him through. X's mother stood next, slower, her breathing careful but determined. They walked onto the stage. Together, mother steadying herself on Elon's arm, Elon trembling with emotions he rarely allowed himself to feel. X opened his eyes at the sound of their steps. His face brightened not with the thrill of victory, but with the warmth of a child seeing his safe place. "Mama," he whispered. His mother burst into tears, collapsing to her knees beside him. X wrapped his small arms around her. Elon knelt beside them, pulling both into an embrace so tight that it seemed like he feared the world might steal them away. "Your heart," Elon whispered into X's hair, "has changed mine." And everyone watching, whether in the auditorium, at home, on phones, or across oceans, felt something deep and unmistakable. This wasn't about fame. This wasn't about legacy. This wasn't about power. This wasn't even about the Musk family or the Trump family. It was about a child reminding millions of people what kindness feels like. Back at the judge's table, Simon wiped his eyes again. "This kid," he murmured to Howie, "just united the entire room. Nobody hated anyone. Nobody argued. Nobody judged anyone. For 5 minutes we all loved each other." Howie nodded, still emotional. "That's what the world needs, Simon. A little more love." The audience, as if hearing that unspoken message, started chanting, "X, X, X, X." But X remained still. He didn't raise his hands to celebrate. He didn't turn to the cameras. He whispered into his mother's ear. "What did he say?" Simon asked gently as they walked back toward the center. X's mother smiled, wiping her tears. "He said, Mama, I just wanted Jesus to hear me sing." A hush fell, then a single clap. Then another, until the entire arena echoed, not with cheers but with the kind of applause given not to a champion, but to a child who'd touched the soul of a nation. As the lights dimmed, and the golden confetti continued to drift softly across the stage, X took his mother's hand. Then Elon's. The three of them stood together, fragile, powerful, united. A family rediscovering itself. A world remembering its heart. A moment that would echo far beyond the walls of any theater. And as the final spotlight narrowed onto X's small, peaceful face, a voiceover captured what everyone already felt. Sometimes, it's not the loudest voice that changes the world, but the purest one.